During the past 2 years, the world's focus and attention has been centered to Gaza. 40 kilometers piece of land and home to over 2 million people. My homeland. The world focused on our suffering during the past 2 years, understandably. Even now, as the cameras go down, the life continues to be hard for the Gazans. Our suffering, misery did not come to an end. And Israel cannot be blamed for all our problems, especially when there is a ceasefire. Because when the cameras go down, the real culprits of Gaza's misery emerge: Hamas. When the world looks at Gaza, it looks usually through a very narrow keyhole. Israeli airstrikes on Gaza. Images of airstrikes, rockets, and suffering flood the screens for sometimes days, sometimes weeks. But then the moment the guns go silent, the world's focus and attention goes elsewhere. The story of Gaza cannot be reduced to only what happens during the wars. To understand the real scourge affecting Palestinians in Gaza, we have to look and examine what happens before the wars, during them, and after the wars. Who starts these wars and why? Because on these periods, it's Hamas who does the most damage to the Palestinians, to the same people who they claim to defend. This essay argues a simple but uncomfortable point. When the world is not looking, Hamas is one of the primary tormentors of the Palestinian society in Gaza. They launched October the 7th, and if they stay in power, they will launch more attacks, drawing more Israeli retaliation and subjugating the same people who they claim to defend. This is what their leaders say openly, and this is what their jihadist ideology entails. They rule without elections, they crush the dissent, they exploit the economy, and they treat the Gazans as pawns, as expendable, not only in clashes with Israel, but in its internal system of control. Hamas seized control of Gaza in 2007 after violent clashes with Fatah. Representatives were thrown off buildings, others dragged with motorcycles, hundreds were killed. And since then, there has been no national elections, no municipal elections, or even university elections. Power has been maintained not through popular mandate, but through security forces, patronage networks, surveillance mechanisms on every word Gazans say, and of course, ideological control. But the nature of that rule was laid bare in the 2019 protest called Bidna Naish, We Want to Live movement. Thousands of Palestinians took the streets protesting the high cost of living, new taxes, and the chronic unemployment. A Human Rights Watch report noted that Hamas responded with what they called another brutal crackdown in the protesters: beating with batons, metal rods, arbitrary arrests, torture. Another report by the US State Department also noted that Hamas arrested thousands of Palestinians during their crackdown on the Banaish movement, including journalists, activists, and their security forces responded with batons, torture, arbitrary arrests. This pattern is important so you can understand what follows. When Gazans tried to challenge Hamas's rule directly, they were met with bullets, arrests, torture, and beating. To disagree with Hamas is not an option. Dissent is not tolerated in the dictionary, and ordinary Gazans seeking their basic human rights are treated like security threats, criminals, or even worse. Against this backdrop, the events of October the 7th, 2023 look very much different from how they are often framed. Let me just take you for one moment before these attacks. Imagine that for 19 years, all what Hamas thought about is how to commit these atrocities. All the money, all the resources that could have been used to enhance the lives of the ordinary Gazans were diverted to build these more than 500 kilometers of tunnels. And even those tunnels, when the war started, not a single child were allowed to shelter in these tunnels, except maybe for the children of Yahya Sinwar who were seen hiding there with their father. Hamas's brutal attack on Israel on October the 7th, killing civilians, kidnapping hostages, was not the result of a public referendum or any kind of democratic decision-making. There was no debate in Gaza on whether to do such an attack that any informed observer would have predicted that it would draw devastating retaliation. In practice, a small cadre of Hamas's military and political leadership made unilateral decision to start an operation whose consequences would be borne primarily by the civilians in Gaza who don't have any say about it. Analysts around the political spectrum all noted that Hamas's leader could have anticipated a massive Israeli response given its past and history, its explicit red lines. Hamas itself tried to kidnap the Israeli soldier in Gil Al in 2006. They saw the consequences And then they did October the 7th anyway. Given its long history of crushing dissent, there was no real mechanism for the Gazans to block or even question these decisions. Those who tried, including my friends, were seen in videos being shot in their legs or tortured inhumanly by Hamas. Gazans absorb the consequences of a war, but they do not authorize it. This is a key feature of Hamas's rule in Gaza. The economic dimension of Hamas is equally troubling. Gaza society is heavily dependent on humanitarian aid and external funding. And there are competing claims here. A serious assessment has to acknowledge them. On the one hand, Israel and some independent analysts have long accused Hamas of diverting humanitarian aid and stealing it, reselling it to pay for their militias and leadership abroad. A 2024 Jerusalem Post report described Hamas as having an octopus-like financial empire. Massive investment front companies all used to finance the militias operating in Gaza. Another report by TBS in 2025 accused Hamas of looting almost 25% of all humanitarian aid sent by the UN at the early months of the war. Hamas has turned the humanitarian crisis in Gaza into an open war, seizing, taxing and using these funds to fund the militias and the political office in Turkey and Qatar. So what we can say here with trust, that Hamas, yes, is diverting and looting this humanitarian aid sent to Gaza. Even Gaza's economy is deeply controlled by Hamas. Access to permits, jobs, etc. It's all controlled by Hamas. Borders from the outside are controlled by Israel. For ordinary Gazans, the effect is the same. A permanent sense of scarcity, and a movement who claims to defend them acts as a gatekeeper to their basics of survival. Even with such a devastating humanitarian crisis in Gaza, Hamas managed to make the food as a money machine to fund their salaries. And while Gaza's population lives under a blockade and more recently the ruins of a destroyed city, Hamas's senior political office lives outside of Palestine. Take Khalid Mishal, for example, the head of Hamas's office outside. Khalid Mishal has been living between Qatar and Turkey, between private jets and luxury hotels. Think tanks, reports, and regional media describe that Khalid Mishal owns between 4 to 5 billion US dollars. Now, these reports are hard to verify, but even if we treat these numbers with caution, the pattern is clear. Hamas's political leadership lives a totally different reality, with donor funds, investments, and companies, while ordinary Gazans live with the consequences of Hamas's leadership decisions. Hamas's internal control system is not limited to cracking down on protest. It also included arrest, torture, extrajudicial execution of people accused allegedly of collaborating with Israel. In 2014, for example, once the war stopped, Hamas executed at least 14 people, all accused allegedly of collaborating with Israel. Now, Human Rights Watch noted that these executions violated the Palestinian law and any international standards. The pattern continued. Human rights and media noted that there is a documented pattern of Hamas using the quote-unquote collaborating with Israel as a tool of fear, to silence, to score political scores on political opponents, and to intimidate Palestinians. Even during this war, and once this ceasefire took effect, Hamas started going after the Gazan families. Once the ceasefire was signed, Hamas went after the Jewish family in Gaza, publicly executed at least 18 members of this family, all accused allegedly of collaborating with Israel. Now, in theory, collaborating with the enemy during a wartime is a serious crime, but under Hamas's opaque system, it's used as a tool of fear to remind the Gazans that not you can only be killed between Israel and Hamas, but you can be killed by Hamas itself for what you say, who you talk to, what you believe in. No court, no trial, no testimonies, nothing. Anyone opposes Hamas's rule or being allegedly accused of collaborating with Israel is enough for a death sentence or at least severe beating. Even now, as international actors debate on ceasefire, reconstruction plan, international stabilization force for Gaza, Hamas has signaled many times that it refuses to disarm. Now, analysts from security institutes and Israel have all noted that Hamas refuses any form of an international stabilization force with the power to disarm them, accepting only limited rules and to oversee the borders and the ceasefire itself. But their guns are non-negotiable. Even now in 2025, leaders like Khalid Mashal have refused to give up the power of ruling Gaza and to give the power to the International Stabilization Force to disarm Hamas's military wing. Some ideas are floating, like freezing or storing Hamas's weapons, but still, all the answers that we are getting from Hamas's leadership that their guns are non-negotiable. For the Palestinians in Gaza, these decisions has consequences. Large-scale reconstruction plans will be hard to achieve because donors don't want to finance a new place where a new war might start in short time. For Israel and other key players, that gives them an argument to keep the siege and the security restrictions, and the Gaza Strip will be looking to a political order where the primary currency is the force, not the popular mandate. In other words, Hamas's refusal to disarm is not only a barrier to Israel, but to a better future for the Gazans themselves. It honestly prevents any chance for a stable future between Israel and Palestine. The Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, the Iranian regime all have a veto card that they can use anytime they think that things are going too well or too stable. Criticizing Hamas does not mean denying Israel's responsibility for the blockade, but any serious account of Palestinians in Gaza has also to acknowledge this truth. When the cameras goes down, Hamas is not a primary shield for the Gazans. Far too often, it's their source of fear.